Welcome to our Thursday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. I'm nearing the end of a series that I've been doing for 4 weeks, teaching verse by verse through the book of Philippians. Tomorrow's going to be my last day to offer you all of these products. I've got this book, a 120-page book that is a verse-by-verse study in the book of Philippians. We've got CDs and DVDs and USBs that were taken from a meeting where I taught verse by verse, and then also the actual television programs where I taught verse by verse. All of these are available to you. And also let me mention again that I'm using my computer because I've written footnotes on every single verse in Philippians. I've actually written footnotes on 27,000 verses in the Bible. And this is just awesome. It's got the Greek and Hebrew in here. You can put your cursor over it and it will instantly bring up what the Greek definition is, the Hebrew definition. It's got references. You put your cursor over it and it brings it up. You don't have to turn to it. And so anyway, this living commentary is really powerful. Tomorrow is going to be my last day to offer these things here over our television program, so please take advantage of it. We're now in Philippians chapter 4, and in verse 15, I was mentioning some of these things yesterday, but I didn't get through with it. Philippians 4:15, Paul said, "Now you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church communicated with me as concerning giving and receiving, but you only. For even in Thessalonica you sent once and again unto my necessity." This is talking about that they supported him after he left the local area. And the Philippians were the only people that did that. I think that that is a tragedy. The Apostle Paul is a man that, he put his life on the line. He was beaten, he was stoned, he was shipwrecked, he was put in prison, he was rejected, he was driven out of town. This man suffered greatly in order to bring the gospel to people, and yet there's only one church that he established that supported him after he left the local area. I think that's terrible. And in our ministry, we've got 65,000 partners who partner with us on a monthly basis. Now, we have the potential of reaching 5.2 billion people around the world, and I know that, of course, not all of those people watch. A small portion watch, but certainly there's millions and millions of people that I minister to, and yet there's a relatively small number of people that support us beyond, themselves. There are people that when they get something from us like this, they may give a gift, and we appreciate that, and that's a blessing. But, being a partner is more than just paying for the material that you get. Being a partner is when you join with that church, with that ministry, to help them reach other people. And when you do that, that just puts you into a whole new category. There are many people that are takers, and they listen to a television program, they go to church, they get products, they do these things because they are trying to help themselves. And certainly that's appropriate, at least for a period of time. You can't set another person free until you've been set free. So we need to get the truth to people, and people need to receive, and I'm not against that. That's great. But when you go to giving beyond what it takes for you to receive, and you are going to give, like giving to our ministry, you give to us so that it's more than what it costs for you to get a free book or a DVD or a CD set, but you are giving to help us reach out and provide these things to other people. Our ministry is different than most in the sense that we give everything away. We have things that we say, this is for a suggested donation. And anyway, I could go into a lot of explanation about why I do things the way I do. But even when we say it's a suggested donation, people give less than that and we send it to them anyway. We have over 50% of the people that contact that don't give a thing, and we send materials to them anyway. Did you know we quit counting when we passed 200 million free books, CDs, DVDs and things like that we gave away. And that's not including our website, because our website has about 1 million visits per month, and we have over 200,000 hours of free material on our website. So the point I'm making is, I give things away, and I don't mind doing that. But the majority of the people, we reach millions of people. There is a very small percentage that give back beyond what it costs for them to get something. Most don't even give anything, but those who do give may give enough to cover what they get. But then we have another level of people, and those are people who give much, much more. You know, I was talking to another minister, very well-known minister. If I was to call their name, you'd know who I was talking about. And we were out to eat, and they said, "You're that guy that gives everything away." And I said, "Yeah." And they began to kind of criticize me over this and say, "Man, we sell our stuff. You ought to be selling." And as we talked, I had the guy that ran my ministry was with me, and we began to share that we average about $60 to $80 per contact to our ministry. We have 110 to 120,000 contacts to our ministry per month. That's not including the million people who visit the website. I'm just talking about people that call, write, text us, or do something like that. And we average around $60 to $80 per contact. This other minister that was talking to us, they didn't tell us what they get, but when we told them what we average per person, their jaw hit the table. I could tell that it was much, much more than they averaged selling their products. Did you know this thing about giving and receiving will work even for ministers? And so anyway, my point is that, see, we give things away. We quit counting when we got up around 200 million free things that we've given away. And there are many people that just join with us, and they give beyond what it costs for them. Again, 50% or more of the people who contact us don't give a thing, and yet we give, and yet we have a huge income because we have other people that are partners and allow us to do that. If you listen to our program, when we say that this is like a free gift, the announcer often will say that Andrew's partners have enabled him to do this, and we just constantly are thanking God for the people who help us and give beyond what it takes for them to get the gospel. I've said all of these things to say that this is Paul talking to his partners. These were people, the only church that ever gave to Paul beyond what it took for them to get the gospel. There were other churches that when he was there, they might let him stay with them, they might feed him, they may have provided some things, but once he was gone, that was it. These Philippians, they sent multiple times to help him, and they had been earnestly wanting to help him more, but he was in transit to Rome. They didn't have the contacts, the communication that we have today, and so they just literally didn't know where he was, didn't know how to help him. But when they found out that he was now in prison in Rome, they sent and supported him, and according to Acts chapter 28, Paul was allowed to live in a hired house for the 2 years that he was imprisoned in Rome. How does a prisoner pay for his house? It was because of his partners, and I believe it was primarily these Philippians. This is who he's talking to. He says, "You Philippians are the only people that supported me after I left the local area. Even in Thessalonica, you sent once and again unto my necessity." And then he says this in verse 17, "Not because I desire a gift, but I desire fruit that may abound to your account." He's saying the reason I'm rejoicing isn't because of what you've done for me, but I know that by you giving to me, that this is going to produce fruit that abounds to your account. You know, I one time went and held a meeting for one of the guys who had graduated from our school, and he pastored a church up in the mountains of Colorado. It was only about 30 people in the church, and he had such a small number of people that he felt bad about asking me to come and just minister to 20 or 30 people. So he had 2 other churches go in with him, and each one of them ran about 30 people. So altogether we had about 100 people or so. And he still knew that there wasn't going to be a large amount of money in this for me. And so when I came, he asked me to receive my own offerings, thinking that if I received the offerings, I couldn't complain about how it was done. So anyway, I was glad to do that. And so I got up, and the very first offering that I took, I got up and I said, "Look, I just came from a church in Charlotte, North Carolina. They gave me $300,000. I said, I don't need your money. I'm not a poor preacher that just got into town, and if you don't give, I can't get out of town. I said, I don't need your money. And when I said that, you could just see all the blood drain out of this guy's face, like you have killed the offering. And I just began to teach them just what Paul is saying. It's not that what I need, you need to give. This is fruit that will abound to your account. When you start taking what God has given and you give, this is the thing that just unleashes the blessing of God in your life. It's like taking a seed and putting it in the ground. You may have seed, but if you don't put it in the ground, it's never going to produce anything. You might be able to eat that seed, but eventually that's the end of it. But if you will take a portion of those seeds and plant them in the ground, this will produce more seeds, and it'll last you for the rest of your life. And I began to teach the people about why they needed to give, not to help me, but it was to help them. And did you know, after that meeting was over, the pastor of one of those small churches, there was 3 churches that went together, he contacted me the next week. And he said, I honestly don't remember what your preaching was, but I remember those offerings. And he said, man, it touched me that I realized that I hadn't been challenging the people in my church in this area of finances because I was afraid that they would think I was wanting their money for me. I saw it as me asking, begging for money. I didn't see it as me encouraging them to plant seed that would bless them. And he said, man, I was so convicted by those offerings that after I left, he got up the next Sunday in front of his church. And he only had 20 or 30 people in the church. And he said, he apologized to them. And he says, man, I have not been telling you the truth. I knew these things that Andrew was saying, but I was bashful. I was timid. I wasn't teaching you because I thought people might misunderstand. And he got on his knees in front of the church and apologized. And he says, please forgive me for not telling you about how giving will bless you. And he apologized to the church. And the church people responded by coming up and hugging him, and they started throwing money on the platform, and they paid off over $10,000 worth of indebtedness. And he said it just literally, out of 20 or 30 people, they had over a $10,000 offering come in, and he said it had transformed that church. Now see, most people don't look at it that way. They think that when a minister goes to talking about money, that the only reason you're doing this is because you want to get my money. I tell you, I'm giving things away. You can't say that about me. These things, we are asking for some type of a gift towards this, but we send it out anyway. If you are accusing me of talking about finances because I'm just trying to milk you and get your money, you can say what you want to. I can't control that, but it's not the truth. We have given away over 200 million free books, CDs, tapes, and things. We have over 200,000 hours of free things on our website. I am not doing this so that I can get your money. I'm doing it because it's the truth. And I'm encouraging you to give. I'm encouraging you to be a partner like these Philippians, because this is how God blesses you. It produces fruit that abounds to your account. And I know that every person watching this, you have needs. And even if you were taken care of, I suspect that you probably could do more if you had more. And there's not a single person watching this that doesn't need more of God's resources. And the way you get it is by giving. It's not by keeping. It's not by hoarding. You know, in the natural, this defies logic. Say, for instance, you want to spend $10,000 on something and you've only got $1,000. Man, in the natural, you'd be crazy to take 100 of that $1,000 and give it away because you're moving away from your goal of having $10,000. And in the natural, that's the way that it is. But see, in the spiritual, the Bible says in Luke 6:38, give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give into your bosom. Because there is a God who promised that when you give, it'll come back unto you, and it'll come back 100-fold in this life, not just in the one to come, but in this life, in Mark chapter 10. Because God promised those things in His Word, then when you are in need and you take a portion of what you've got and you plant it like a seed, that's not diminishing you, it's increasing you. Now that goes completely contrary to the natural mind, because the natural mind doesn't factor God into things. To a person who isn't believing God, if your goal is 10,000, you've only got 1,000 and you give 100 away, well then you've moved away from your goal. But in God's economy, you take that 100 and you give and you get 100-fold off of that. That right there is $10,000. Man, isn't that awesome? And see, that's what God has promised. And so this is what Paul is saying. He says, I'm rejoicing that your care for me has flourished again, but I'm not rejoicing just because I've gotten something. I've learned to be content in whatever state I'm in. That's not the issue. I'm rejoicing because this is going to abound to your account. It's going to be fruit. God is going to bless you because you've blessed me. Did you know when I finally got this revelation, it changed my life? I was like that pastor that I was talking about. And I started in the ministry in 1968, but it was 1996. That's nearly 30 years later. I was struggling financially. We had collection agencies come after us. I was giving things away, but anyway, it's a long story. There was multiple reasons. I'm not a great businessman and I didn't have people around me, and there was just multiple things. But nonetheless, I was struggling financially, and I knew that in order for me to accomplish what God wanted me to do, my finances needed to increase. And so I took about 100 scriptures, wrote them out longhand. I began to study these things, and for 2 years, I just meditated on the Word. I was planting the seed of God's Word in my heart. And then all of a sudden, I got this revelation that me talking about finances wasn't for me, it was for the other people. And that I needed to speak about it. Just like when Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 17, he went to this widow at Zarephath, and he asked her for some water. And as she was going to get the water, he says, bring me something to eat too. And she says, I only have enough for me and my son. I was gathering some sticks so that I could take this little bit of oil, this little bit of meal, make one cake that we could eat it and then die. It was during a famine, and this was a widow. Women didn't have jobs the way that they do today. I mean, she was destitute. She was down to her last little bit. And you know what Elijah did? Instead of just giving her some money, he says, you make that cake, but you give it to me first. And then you go back and make for your son. Because the Lord says, and he gave her a promise from the Word, that your meal and your oil won't diminish until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth. Did you know most people would look at that as, well, typical preacher, taking the last little bit of food out of a widow's mouth. But you know what? He wasn't taking from her. He was giving to her. That was her way. She needed to give. She needed, instead of somebody to come and just give her something and help her, she needed to give and start receiving an abundance from God. And so she went and made that last little cake for Elijah first. And for 3.5 years, her and her son and Elijah lived off of that. And she not only got her physical needs supplied, but her son died. And because she had been giving into the man of God's life, he was able to raise her son from the dead. The first time in the history of the Bible, first recorded person being raised from the dead. All happened because he asked a woman to give him something. I could just imagine the Jerusalem Post headlines saying, prophet takes last meal out of widow's mouth, death imminent, something like that. But see, the truth was, it should have read, prophet gives widow the greatest opportunity of her life to give, so it'll be given back unto her. And she lived off of it for 3.5 years and saw her son raised from the dead. People that don't understand this, people who are just carnal, people who had a Judas spirit, they will always look at ministers as all you're after is money. And certainly there are a lot of ministers that is their motivation. I can't say that all ministers do this correctly. But I'm saying if it's done correctly, it's like Paul is talking about. The reason he was rejoicing wasn't because they had given to him, but it was because he desired fruit that would abound to their account. When you start giving, and more than just the giving for a product, more than just giving to pay for what you've got, but when you start giving unselfishly to help somebody else receive, you've already received. Now you want to bless somebody else. that pushes you into a brand new category, and you start having fruit that will abound to your account. Jesus talked about this in the 10th chapter of the book of Mark, and he said, there is nobody, no man, that hath left house, father, mother, brother, sister, or lands for my sake and the gospel, but what he will receive 100-fold in this life with persecutions, and in the life to come, everlasting life. He said that there's nobody who will ever give up something but what they will receive 100-fold in this life. That's not talking about in eternity. In eternity, our giving will also bless us. But in this life, you will receive 100 times what you give. You know, if you really believe that, which very few people do believe that, but if you really believed what the Word of God said, and if I was receiving an offering, and if you had nothing, it would be to your advantage to poke your neighbor and say, could you please give me $10? If you'll give me $10, I'll pay you back $20, because you know that if you give 10, you're going to get 100-fold off of that. That means that you would receive $1,000 off of that $10 gift. And then you could take that $20, pay the person back that you borrowed it from, and you'd be $980 ahead. If you really believed that I could do that, you would be crazy not to do it. And yet Jesus said there's nobody who will give in this life but what you'll receive 100-fold in this life. If you really believe that, you would be giving. And somebody says, but I need this money. Well, you need all of the increase that would come off of sowing that seed. I tell you, if you really believe, you would be a giver. And this is what Paul is saying. The reason he was rejoicing that they had given to him, of course he was blessed by it. He's not denying that. But he's saying the real reason I'm rejoicing is because I know that this will abound to your account. You know, I had a minister not long ago that gave me, I think it was $10,000, I forget how much, but it was towards our building program. And he says, I'm sowing this because we need our building program. We're believing God for things. And anyway, he came back and told me that all of the money they need, and it was much more than $10,000, it all came in. And he hadn't seen that kind of income before, but when he started giving like that, then it was multiplied back to him. I'm telling you, this is a truth of God, that when you give, it produces fruit that abounds to your account, not only in the future, but right here in this life. I want to thank you for watching our YouTube channel and the programs that we have available, and I want to encourage you that you can get the materials that we've offered. Also, I'd like to encourage you to like our program and subscribe to what we're doing. We have a lot of material, and I believe it'll be a real blessing to you. So thank you for being a part of it. God bless you.